Hello. In the next few minutes I'm going to be showing you how to install and use your taper tools on a small combination sander. These sanders are configured somewhat differently, but they have two things in common. One is a 6-inch sanding disc with a small platform, and they have a 4 by 36-inch sanding belt. There are several other manufacturers that make sanders in this configuration. These three do work. Some of the other ones that have these typical configurations should also work. If they don't have this configuration, I don't believe they will work. At the end of this video, I will be discussing in further detail some of the particulars of these three units. In the next few minutes, I'll be showing you how to install, set up, and use your taper tool for knocks and tips on a small combination sander. Before we start the installation, we need to check a few things on the sander. The first thing is we need to square the table to the wheel. You can use a square, or since this is handy, we'll go ahead and use the adapter plate. The next thing that's very important is we need to check the sandpaper and make sure that it is adhered very tightly to that wheel. If it's loose or it's damaged, it can damage your tool or it can ruin your shafts. So let's just take it and move it around, take a look at it. It looks real good. Alright, we need to make sure that the guide for the slot drops into the slot. This one does, and it slides a little bit. It fits nice and snug. It initially was a little bit big, and so I had to sand down just a little bit on the sander to get it to fit. Once we know that that's going to fit, we're going to take some wood glue, put it in the slot of the adapter plate, and then put the guide into that slot. You'll probably need a hammer to do that, and then once it's done, we'll set that aside and let the glue set up for a few minutes. The glue has dried on our adapter plate and our guide. That's ready to go. I've attached the taper tool to the adapter plate. Before we put this on the sander, the guide fits very, very tightly, so you're going to want to move that back and forth several times to loosen it up a bit. Then slide it all the way out. Go ahead and set this on the table, sander table. We're going to line the stop up so that it's just about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch from the edge of that sanding wheel. At this point in time, you could just clamp this to the sanding table and use it that way, or what we're going to do is just fasten this permanently, because this machine will be used just to do arrows. If you're going to be using this machine for other things, then you're just going to want to clamp it on and just use it that way. I'm going to take the taper tool off. We're going to take a Tek screw and a drill and drive that Tek screw down through that nut. It might take 2 or 3 times to get it through there, but now it's fastened permanently, and we'll go ahead and set the guide plate back on and get ready to set up to taper some arrows. Our base plate and our taper tool are now mounted on the sander, and so it's time to go ahead and get ready to taper some shafts. What you want to do is slip 2 or 3 pieces of paper between the taper tool and the sanding wheel. I'm going to use the instructions here. We're going to push that back snugly, tighten things down, pull out the paper. Then we're going to look in here to see how we did. It looks like we're a little bit far away there, so I'm going to do that again. There we are. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get the taper tool adjusted to the right taper. We're going to need a field tip or a blunt We're going to need a Nock, possibly. We're going to need a pencil, and of course, some arrow shafts. If you haven't already straightened your arrow shafts, it would be best to do that before you taper. Otherwise, you could have some tapers that are a little bit messed up. If you have already cut your shafts to length, I'm going to say that you should not use those to adjust the tool. You're going to end up using up a little bit of the length. So either use only one of those and consider it wasted, or if they're not cut to length, then you can go through the steps one at a time and just use one arrow shaft once and set it aside, and so forth. I'm going to use a shaft, or a shaft that's probably like a number 2 or number 3, and I'm never going to shoot it, so that's what I'm going to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring our stop all the way over to the middle of the taper tool. We're going to turn on the sander and slip the arrow shaft in there and get it close to the sander. One thing that you will want to do is put your hand on the top of the plate here and push down with the heel of your hand as you push that shaft in, and it helps that arrow shaft get in. First taper. So now what we're going to do is take a pencil and make some lines along that taper, 3 or 4 or 5 around the circumference of it. We'll take our field tip, put it on, twist it around a couple of times, and take a look at this. I don't know if you can see it, but basically what we've got is we've got smeared graphite all the way along that taper, and so that means right off the bat we got a good taper. If that doesn't happen, what you need to do is adjust the table a little bit at a time, and you want to move the taper tool away from the sanding belt so that you don't end up sanding off your part of your tool. It won't damage it as far as functionality, but it won't look real good. So now you're ready to taper some tools, or some arrows, and what you want to do is go ahead and run all of your points first, or your nocks first, and then when you're ready to flip that shaft around, you want to move this back towards the middle, tighten it down, and then go ahead and start the other end. We're going to go ahead and put a Nock on here and see how it feels. It feels pretty good. Use our pencil. Plastic doesn't want to smudge the graphite quite as much, but I can see that it's doing that a little bit here. So now we've got a good fit and we're ready to go. Once you've got your taper tool set up and ready to go, one thing I will tell you is that if you haven't used your taper tool for a while, you've moved it around, what you will want to do is check that taper angle before you taper a lot of shafts and find out you've got a bad angle. So what I would do is just go ahead and give it a try. Now we've got smudged graphite pretty much the whole distance, so we're good to go, and we can taper just about as many arrow shafts as we want to do. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your taper tool. Here are 3 small combination sanders. The sander on the left is a Central Machinery. I bought it from Harbor Freight for $80. The sander on the right is a Rikon. It was purchased by a friend of mine at a local woodworking supply outlet. The cost was $140. The sander in the middle is available at Home Depot, and it's $120. The friend of mine, when he finds out what I have found out, is not going to be real happy. The Ryobi sander is basically a clone of the Rikon, or vice versa. The only difference that there appears to be is the base is taller on one than the other. All of the other parts appear to be interchangeable. The Central Machinery sander will require you, if you want to use that one, to install a piece of graphite cloth. And if you add the cost of the graphite cloth and the adhesive, you're probably going to be looking at a total of about $95. So that's the cost comparison between the 3. If you're going to be using your sander to do other woodworking tasks, the difference between these 2 sanders is that the Ryobi has a vacuum pickup port for a dust collection system. You can plug in a shop vac or another vacuum system to collect the dust. The Central Machinery sander has no dust collection on it. The Harbor Freight model is a bit underpowered if you're going to be doing other woodworking tasks. I actually stalled out the motor as I was sanding down the shaft guide. The Ryobi appears to have plenty of power. Other than that, the taper tools will work for tapering your shafts on any of these machines. There are similar machines that are available from other manufacturers, and as long as they're similar in configuration, they should work. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your interest in Tim's Taper Tools.